welcome to Module 5, in which I will discuss the resume and the cover letter. So first of all, I want to begin with a definition of what a resume is. A resume is essentially a summary of your relevant education, skills, and work, as well as volunteer experience. Now, before we go into more detail, let's keep in mind that human resources professionals generally spend fewer than 10 seconds scanning resumes in the first round of evaluations. So this means as applicants, we have to get their attention pretty quickly. If they start scanning it and they don't see anything they're interested in or they like, then that resume likely ends up in a pile of resumes they will not be looking at again. So the other thing we need to keep in mind, the purpose of submitting a resume is to get a job interview. So no one is going to hire us just based off our resume anymore. Organizations want to bring potential candidates in, meet with them, get to know them before they make the decision to offer them a job. So let's talk about the format and the structure as well as content of a resume. So at the very top, you want to have your name and your contact information. And as a minimum, you want to include your phone number and your email address. So if they're interested in meeting with you and interviewing you, they can get in touch with you. Sometimes students don't want to give out their home address, and I don't know that it's necessary to list it on your resume, but they need your number and your email address. Another thing you don't want to do if you're a student and you have a school address as well as a home address, and that is to list both of them. Again, considering that a HR professional may spend 5 to 10 seconds looking at a resume, seeing two addresses at the very top can be kind of confusing to them. They hate that, and it's just another way of sort of wasting time that could be spent for them to look at more critical, more important information. So if you want to list your complete address during the school year, list your school address during summer breaks or winter breaks if you're sending out application resumes and cover letters, use your home address. The other thing students sometimes do, some of you have been taught to do this in other classes, is to include an objective. Here's the problem with the objective. Frequently, objectives are very broad and very obvious. Things such as, I would like to further my skills in this field and find a job that challenges me and offers potential for growth. That's something we all want, so that's not really helpful. A more specific objective, if we're going to write one, might be that we're looking for an entry-level accounting job with a medium-sized private firm. I would say that if you are responding to an actual job ad and you're including a cover letter, do not include an objective. Again, 5 to 10 seconds. So reading a lengthy, obvious, kind of irrelevant objective, again, is taking away from important information that the hiring manager or human resources professional should see. If you are just sending out mass mailings of your resume because you're about to graduate and your parents are breathing down your neck saying, have you found a job yet? And you're hoping somebody will respond to your mailing of the resume, then I would say it's fine to include the objective, but if you're including a cover letter because you are responding to an actual job ad, don't use it. The other problem with the objective is that sometimes it may be too specific, so a potential employer might look at your resume and think that you might be highly qualified for another job that they currently have an opening for, but since your objective doesn't include that kind of job, they may think you're not interested. So just keep that in mind. Now, in terms of the structure of the resume, early in your career, you will probably want to create a chronological resume. And that means that you're starting with your current educational and work credits and work your way back in reverse chronological order. Now, should you start with education? Should you start with work experience? That depends. If you have relevant work experience, and I would say more than one summer internship, then you probably want to start with work experience. Obviously, you want to mention that you have the educational background that qualifies you also, but the actual hands-on work experience will probably always trump the education. So just keep that in mind. If you don't have any relevant work experience, then that's okay. You're young, you're just about to graduate from college, so no one can reasonably expect you to have it. That's fine. Then start with education. So education should include your school address in just city and state, Towson, Maryland, your anticipated graduation date. If you're close, if you're a junior or a senior, that's fine. Or else the credits you've earned. You want to list your major or majors, minor or minors. If you have earned a degree at another school before transferring to your current school, make sure you include that. And just again, keep in mind that in the chronological resume, you always begin with your current school and then work your way back. So, for example, if you transferred from Frederick Community College to Towson, list Towson first and then list FCC. If your GPA, that's the next consideration, is a 3.0 out of a 4.0, that's considered strong, then you will want to list it under education. If it is below that, don't. Now, sometimes our general cumulative GPA might not be a 3.0, but our major GPA is. Sometimes students are not that interested in the electives or core classes they have to take, but they're really into their major classes and they work very hard. So if that's the case and you're doing really well in your major classes, list that GPA. I think there's a calculator on the Towson website to help you calculate that. Just make it absolutely clear that that's what it is, so that an employer who's going to get a copy of your transcript doesn't think that you're giving inaccurate information. Also, if you have studied abroad or have gotten very prestigious scholarships, that's something you may want to actually list at the top of your resume with your education. Now, with your work experience, remember that it must always be relevant to your objective, the job that you're applying for. So don't just list everything you've ever done. Okay? The other thing you don't want to do is dismiss your volunteer experience. If you've done the job, if you have hands-on experience of doing something, please don't dismiss that as not having any value just because you didn't get paid for it. So if you have done the job, list it as work experience. Okay? Include the job title, that's important. The name and address, again, just city and state is enough, of your employer, and your employment dates, and that would mean month and year. Then describe your work experience using bullets. Make it graphically very easy to understand, very accessible, and then start each bullet with a descriptive action verb. Now, for current jobs, those verbs should be in present tense. For previous jobs, those verbs should be in past tense. So examples of descriptive action verbs might be managed, analyzed, scheduled. Okay, so each verb immediately very clearly shows what you did. The things you want to avoid is worked, because it's work experience, so that's a little too broad and too obvious. The other thing, and that's something you frequently see in job descriptions, and that is was responsible for. Again, that is too broad. So if you say was responsible for sales, that does not tell us if you were a salesperson, if you were a sales manager, if you were a sales trainer. So use verbs that clearly indicate to a reader immediately what it was you did. Okay? Provide clear and compelling details. Be specific. Okay? If you can, if at all possible, quantify your success. Again, if you were in sales and you exceeded your sales quota by 30% every month, that's quantifiable. Say that. Okay? That will show a reader immediately how successful you were at your job. The next area following work experience should be skills in general. This can be sort of a catch-all, or it can be a specific category. Sometimes people who have a lot of computer experience might have a specific category for IT or computer skills. It should always include Microsoft Office. That's sort of a standard expectation among employers today. Here you can also list foreign language skills. Even if they're not actually required, it will always look good on a resume to have foreign language skills. And if applicable, you can also list current certifications. So if it's an environmental job where you may have to be out on the bay in a boat and you can pilot a boat, or you have scuba diving certifications if that's required in the job, obviously include that in the skills. Honors and awards and extracurricular activities should be at the bottom. Volunteer experiences that are not relevant to your objective should also go there. But again, if the volunteer experience was relevant to what you're applying for, don't bury it at the bottom of your resume. Move it up to work experience. Okay? If you have only filled up half a page, sometimes students just haven't ever done anything besides go to school, and you definitely want to include, you want to submit an entire page of resume, and if it's only half a page, it's going to look a little awkward. Then it would be okay to list references. As a general rule, do not include references on your resume. References always belong on a separate page. The other thing you want to keep in mind is it used to be a convention to write references available upon request at the very bottom of the resume. That is no longer a convention because employers argue that if a candidate wants to be hired, he or she's going to have to provide references. Okay. Now, before I move on to the cover letter, there's one more thing I want to say, and that is regarding work experience. You can, because you always want to keep the most relevant experience at the top of your resume, also break your work experience into relevant work experience and other work experience. So for example, if you actually worked in your career field, the field that you're now applying for again a few years ago, and you then quit that job because you wanted to fully concentrate on school instead and got a part-time job at a restaurant or in retail, in a chronological resume, technically the retail or restaurant job would be at the top of the resume and the relevant job in the past would be below that. You don't want to do that. So what I would do in that case is I would break it out into relevant work experience, describe the job you've done in the past that's relevant to your career field, and then have other work experience that would follow in the other category. Other work experience, for example, can be if you work in retail or in a restaurant, working well within a team. So again, we don't want to list all kinds of details that have nothing to do with what you're applying for. But if there are certain transferable skills, such as team skills or time management skills, that you can clearly illustrate through previous work experiences and specific aspects of them, then that's something you would list in your resume. Now, moving on to the cover letter, let's talk about the purpose of that. While the resume should establish that you are qualified to perform a job, the cover letter should illustrate that you as a person, as a human being, are a strong match for the organization. And that's not the same thing. So how can you figure out if that's the case? To do that, research the organization's vision or mission statement. What is this organization about? Do they care about the community? Is this an organization that wants to empower community members and their employees? Do they care about the environment? So look at that. And then in your cover letter, provide, first of all, a purpose statement that asserts that you fully embrace their corporate philosophy. And then in the body of your cover letter, you'll want to show through specific detailed examples that you embrace that philosophy in your daily life and that your values perfectly align with the organization's corporate philosophy. Okay. You will want to look very closely at the job ad or internship ad, and if there's something that the organization wants you to know, whether it's a certain software or whatever, you can mention that in your cover letter, obviously. And in fact, you'll want to do that. What you don't want to do is just rehash to summarize your resume. They will read your resume. They don't need to read it twice. Okay? So what you want to do is make sure that not only are you qualified to perform the job, but that you're also the right personal match for them. So what we want to do now is look at a specific example of a resume and a cover letter. This is an actual resume from a former student. Also, by the way, I always change the names on sample documents. Okay. This was a student at College Park who pretty much worked with me over the course of an entire semester on refining his resume. He applied for 3 internships the following year and was accepted into all 3 of them. So while I would not say that it's a perfect example of a resume, it's clearly a very strong example and a very successful one. And as I go through it, I will point out what's really strong and what potential weaknesses might be. So let's start out with the contact information. We can see the name big at the very top, and the contact information is easy to read. So if we want to email him or call him, it's all right there. Because the student had only had 1 summer internship prior to applying for all these other internships, he decided to start with his education. And his education credits certainly were very strong. So he was a double major in business and in economics and finance at the Robert Smith School of Business and the Miller Tiding School of Social and Behavioral Sciences at College Park. He certainly has a perfect GPA. The thing I should have caught when he sent this to me was the fact that he bolded his GPA. Don't. Okay? It's a perfect GPA, but try not to draw attention to the fact that it is a 4.0. Okay? They should see it. The other thing that seems unnecessary is he says academic honors 4.0 cumulative GPA for the past 4 years. It is unnecessary because to get a 4.0 out of a 4.0, obviously you need that GPA every single semester. So I don't think we need to say that. Now let's look at his experience. He decided to divide it up into relevant experience and other professional experience. The relevant experience was an internship with Merrill Lynch the year before. When the student originally came to me to start working on his draft of the resume, the bullets were kind of vague and general. So I asked him to tell me a little bit about what he did, and it turned out that he called people he had never met before, never talked to before, and sold them or set up these extensive financial planning programs. So that's when I suggested that I would begin the first two bullets with cold call, because that's a very difficult thing to do for a lot of us, and I think it's pretty impressive that he was able to do that and get people to trust him with their life savings. Okay. The other thing that's kind of important, that's what I wanted to draw your attention to in the third bullet, is remember I said earlier, if you can quantify your success, do that. In the 3 months he worked there, he generated leads totaling $10 million in clients, and 3 million of them were actually closed. So that's a pretty good success rate for a summer intern. Okay. The other experiences he has, being the finance chairman at United InnoWorks Academy at the University of Maryland chapter. Again, he's very specific with his action verbs: raised, managed, purchased, trained. We're getting specific amounts, so he's quantifying his success, how much money he raised, how much he budgeted. Very specific. The third one, being a student tutor for academic support and career development unit, again, just showed one more skill that he has, and that is helping others succeed, helping people with really tight, rough schedules. Student athletes, again, face enormous challenges in keeping up with their classwork and being a student athlete. So being able to help those fellow students, again, shows a real skill. Finally, the bottom of that resume, I would say, has some issues. The first thing I want to point out is computer skills should not go at the very bottom. They're way more important than that. And they certainly should not be below honors and awards and leadership experience. So I would definitely move them up. Now, leadership experience was something that was really stressed at College Park. I think that was sort of part of the culture there, that students needed to show that they had leadership experience. While that is clearly important when we apply for jobs in which we need leadership qualities, if we are supervisors, managers, that's a critical skill. If the job ad makes it clear that they're looking for a candidate who can work well in a team of peers, then hitting the leadership experience that hard might actually be counterproductive, because what it suggests is that you don't want to be someone working with peers in a team, you want to lead. And that's not what they're looking for. So be careful with that. Okay, so what seems to be a good thing, again, might actually work against you depending on the circumstances. Okay. He has some nice honors and awards, but I think those should certainly go to the bottom. The other thing overall within that resume, I would say, it seems a little dense. There's a lot of information, and I think if we could open that up a little bit, maybe eliminate some of the leadership credits, creating more white space and making it a little less overwhelming for the reader. Now, as far as his cover letter, here I want to point out, first of all, it is addressed to dear sir or madam. Ideally, you want to address a cover letter to an actual person. Obviously, that's not always going to be the case. In a lot of online applications now, you're not being given an actual name. However, if the ad mentions an email address or a phone number, I would strongly urge you to call or email and say, I'm interested in applying for this job. Can you please tell me who the person in charge of hiring is? I would like to send it to him or her. How do you spell that person's name? That way you can send it directly to that person, and it will always look better than using the sort of general salutation. Now, in the introductory paragraph, I think he strongly establishes right away that he has researched their corporate philosophy, their mission or vision statement, and he makes it very clear how he ties in, how he is a strong match for their corporate philosophy. In the 3 body paragraphs, he develops each of these ideas. So he's starting with integrity in general. He talks about the fact that he recently applied to join the Student Honor Council. Sometimes during class discussions, students question how helpful that is because he has yet to be accepted for that part. I think just to show that he values integrity and would like to be a part of that process, I think is important. He has also included diversity. When he started researching the organization for the purpose of applying for this, he mentioned that looking at their website, he saw lots of pictures that suggested diversity. Employees who were Asian, African American, Hispanic, and asked me if he should make a reference to diversity. I think if it's clear from the website that that's something the organization values, I think it might be a good idea to actually address it, and he's done it pretty subtly. The second body paragraph, he talks a little bit about the philosophy on integrity and making sure that the client's interests are always focused on first. And I think that's important. So showing that as a person, as a professional in sales, we would rather not close a deal and wait until we have the perfect product that will make the client 100% happy, will enable us to build trust with that client. Think if you went to a store in the mall and were ready to buy something and the salesperson said, I don't think you're going to be very happy with that, but we're going to get something in next week that I think will be perfect for you. When it comes in, I will hold it for you and I will call you. You would probably tend to trust that person because clearly that person didn't just want to make a quick sale but had your best interest in mind. So that's sort of where this is going. In the third body paragraph, I think the student is kind of taking a risk. Morgan Stanley is a pretty conservative organization, and questioning their growth or changes in the marketplace seems kind of a step in potentially the wrong direction. But what he successfully does is to show that he doesn't just want a job and a paycheck, that he would like to contribute his own ideas, his own entrepreneurial skills to help the company grow and do so dynamically and enthusiastically. And I think it probably paid off in the end. Okay. So some of the final thoughts on resumes and cover letters. This course should help you better understand the rhetorical situation of applying for a job. So the fact that this is not a one-size-fits-all, that each application is specific to a particular company and a particular job. So make sure that if you have an existing resume, edit it for that purpose. Don't just create one resume and send it out to everybody. What you will probably want to do is create a master document that has every job you've ever done in it, so that for one thing you can keep track of all of them. Also, if in the future you ever want to apply for a government job, for some government jobs they will require you to list every job you've ever had. And right now that might be easy to do, but in another 10 years from now it's going to be a lot more challenging. So create that master list so you can always go back and pull from that. Okay. The other thing is, again, I will show you sort of the basics of what you need to keep in mind, but I would always make sure that you show your resumes to professors in your department. And I would say particularly to the adjunct professors who are probably still working in that field, who kind of know what kind of potential candidates their company is looking for, so that you really get an insider's perspective in your career field and what a resume for that career field should look like. Because I would argue not all of them are necessarily the same. For a business job, it should be very conservative, very clean looking. Whereas if you are in graphic design, you can probably get away with other graphic choices. The other thing is we have the Career Center at Towson University, so take advantage of them. Go in. I think they have mock interviews. They have all kinds of resources to help you with that. Okay, and as always, if you have any questions, any concerns, contact me. I always encourage my students in my hybrid classes, if they want to help with their resume and cover letter, to actually come in during office hours, because during an hour in person we can probably accomplish quite a lot. So thank you, and I will see you in the next module.